Hello and welcome to the first inaugural premiere of the Why Sci-Fi series that's going to be amazing, explosive. It all depends on these guys right here because this could be one of many, one in a series, or it could be first and last. And it's all up to my amazing guests because you have to start it off strong. So first off, quick introduction. We've got coming to us all the way from the only state in US that used to be a country, I believe, Whitney from Secret Sauce. Hello, Whitney.
Hi, thanks for
Hi.
having me.
Yeah. Oh, I'm super excited to have you on. And then also, there may be a little bit of time lag with Sam. There could be, we may have to wait for his answers. Sam, not so wise, is coming to us all the way from somewhere on the edge of Kuiper Belt. No, it's the edge of Europe. It's the edge of Europe. It's Iceland, right, Sam?
That's right. Thank you so much for having me. What an honor, and absolutely no pressure. Thank you for that, Bart.
Yeah, absolutely no pressure. The future of my channel, really, not just this series, but my channel depends on you guys.
Yeah,
Your
no problem.
performance here today. So let's have a good time. How do you say hello in Icelandic? Is it just hello?
I mean, they have that hello, but
Hello.
if you want to be more proper, you will say góðan daginn.
What?
Góðan daginn. It basically just means like good day or
Okay.
yeah,
Okay,
it's like it's the góðan daginn. Yeah.
Daginn is like a day. Okay. Very cool. I'd love to visit Iceland one day. It's definitely on the bucket list. I know, Whitney, you went to Scotland recently. That must have been amazing too.
You're George R. R. Martin. And he's like, yep. And I'm like, wow, how does it feel to be super famous? And he's like, some days are better than others. And I was like, yep, that checks out. I mean, I'm a stunning conversationalist.
Yeah, clearly I skipped over Iceland, so I need to rectify that.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Everybody's welcome. It's a beautiful country, and there is just endless things to do.
So guys, tell me, maybe Whitney, let's start with you. My question, obviously the question that is framing this conversation is why sci-fi? Why do you like to read science
I
fiction?
have to say, Bart, last time we had this discussion of why read, I was first. So I'm not going to go first this time.
Okay.
Sam.
All right, fair enough. Sam, you're on the spot.
Why sci-fi?
Why do you like science fiction?
Because I like to turn my nose up at other people. It's a wonderful way of being better than others.
God save our gracious King, long live the noble King, God save the King.
No, obviously, so everybody calls sci-fi the genre of ideas. It's a very kind of stereotypical description of sci-fi, but it kind of fits. Me, I think that's why, because there's just so much you can explore within sci-fi. I think you guys were talking about this with Johanna, the range of subgenres within the genre.
Yeah.
There's just so much variety that there's always something that will interest me. And it asks the big questions for me. Also, there are so many reasons. Another reason is awe. Like, I feel awe inspired when I read a humongous space opera, for example. And there's almost like a wish to be in these stories. I know that, for example, the culture, which we'll talk about, I want to live in the culture. So it's just lovely to read them and just like kind of go far away and be in the culture and just pretend that I can do whatever I want, basically. So there are many reasons, but mostly it makes me think a lot and just the sheer variety within the genre.
Well, that's a great answer. I love that answer. A lot of what you said resonates with me. So I mean, there's really obviously no wrong answer why someone wants to read any type of genre. But I think your answers here are really on point and they do resonate with me. What about you, Whitney? You had a moment to think about it. I did not prep you guys with this, so I do apologize.
No.
If I do future episodes, whoever's coming on will know, and we'll have a minute to think about it. So I do apologize for that. I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, I mean, I don't think that there's a different answer than Sam's, really, but I would agree about the potential and the questions asked and the way that authors get to play around with all of the different questions asked, different ideas, different future possible potentials.
Yeah.
Is the future going to be good or bad or some other kind of conundrum in between? I also like the questions that I didn't even know to ask. A lot of really cool writers, ask so many questions that I didn't even know to ask the question, much less play with the idea and the answer. And that's definitely something that really draws me to sci-fi. And the fact that some of science fiction really, at least for what we know now, could actually happen. So I think that is an extra layer of, it's almost like philosophy in a way, like it's applicable to real life. It in many ways can even drive our future, drive our invention. It can drive where technology goes and what the bounds of that future could look like. I don't know. I don't understand how anyone doesn't like sci-fi.
That's a great answer as well. Yeah, I agree with, especially with the last statement you made. I don't understand also why someone would not enjoy science fiction, as it is so mind expanding, mind blowing with the possibilities. When you open the page to all possibilities, and especially what I like to read in science fiction are books that kind of mix the wonder and the hard science with also human side, well developed characters, and then it's just magic. Then you get the best of both worlds. In my opinion. And here, since we're going to be talking a little bit about culture and about specifically the book Use of Weapons, and here I should maybe mention that the three of us, we just a couple of days ago finished the book. We had a fantastic buddy read. So I want to thank you both for that. The buddy read was amazing. It was a lot of fun. And now we're going to talk about the book a little bit. And here I just want to mention that thinking about why read, I have a quote from Ian M. Banks, the author of all the culture novels, where he says science fiction, in his opinion, science fiction is the most important of genres, as it is the only genre that deals directly with change, with the effects of change on humans. So I think that was interesting that he just went straight out and said, no, this. Because he also wrote other books, as I know, Sam, you've talked, and when we were talking on the buddy read, that you've read some of them that are completely outside the genre. He goes by Ian Banks without the sans M, but yeah, he felt that science fiction is the most important of genres. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? On his quote, that it's the most important of genres?
I would never be so lofty as to claim anything is the most important of anything, mainly because I'm not educated enough to really say. But I think all genres have different levels of importance within different fields.
I agree.
So I think, for example, fantasy is it's a lot more forward in being allegorical rather than realistic, if you like. So that gives you other ways to tell a story and get your themes and philosophies across. So I personally think they're just different tools. Now, I know you guys are both more sci-fi orientated, but I'm both, really. And I read them for different reasons because of that. So as much as I love the man, because he is my favorite author, I'm not sure I agree, but he knows more than me. So.
Okay.
Well, I would also say that I am, even though my channel is sci-fi only, I started in lots of other genres. And I do occasionally read books that are in other genres. I just don't talk about them on my channel because that's not what my channel is about.
Yeah.
So that being said, I kind of agree. I think really what you get out of each genre is different. Like you said, you can get escapism a little bit more with fantasy, but you can learn history from historical fiction. you can learn about psychology and, like a little bit about yourself from contemporary fiction. I think that I saw a YouTube video, so this is not a quote from me, I'm not the smart, but I saw a YouTube video saying that humans are the only creatures who have to tell a story to understand ourselves.
Mm.
And I thought that was a really interesting, cool quote. I have zero idea of which video that was that said that, but so I do think that all of the genres have a place, and I do go to different books for different reasons. But I do think that, especially in my reading life, I have just matured into and fallen into science fiction. I feel like it's the place where I can have the biggest discussions.
Yeah.
And that's really what lights my fire now. But it wasn't a place that I wanted to be in when I was in high school. And it wasn't really that for me in grad school either. I just wanted to go off and escape, and I didn't want to have big discussions then. So I think it also depends on where you are in life as well.
So true. Yeah, I was just surprised to hear him just right out say it. It's the most important of genres. That was a big statement. He definitely qualifies to make it, as he, wrote so many amazing science fiction books, and also others that I've looked into a little bit that seem to have quite a bit of following. His literary output is also quite large. So here I have a question for you, since we kind of touched on it a little bit. I think science fiction has kind of two sides to it. It has the hard SF, and then it has the softer side to it. The more maybe imaginative, maybe now with like kind of overlapping with fantasy a little bit. We see some of those stories that could be. Which one do you guys gravitate towards? Which ones do you like to read more? Is it more the softer, or is it more the hard SF? Grounded in real science. Whoever wants to go first.
I'm going to cop out like super hard.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that I gravitate towards one or the other. I think it depends on my mood. Sometimes I'll have times where I need an idea to chew on and play with and think about. And then sometimes I'm like burnt out, and I want to explore a character. I want to go into space. I want to see a new world or something like that. And I don't want to think crazy hard about questions. And there are those books out there, and granted they are few and far between, but there are books that have both.
Yeah.
And I think those are really my jam. So I wouldn't limit the genre to just hard and soft, because I think they each have their place. And I can't read a whole month's worth of hard science fiction, and I can't read a whole month's worth of soft science fiction. I have to have them both.
Yeah, and before I let you answer, Sam, I would dare say, because I'll forget, Whitney, that maybe Ian M. Banks strikes a really good balance between the two. That's my sense after reading 3 books. Please, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I think it's similar to the sci-fi or fantasy question. It kind of just depends on my mood and just the synopsis of the story, really. I can be interested in either equally. But if I had to choose, like if someone was like, you have to choose now, I would probably choose the more hard sci-fi, I guess. The space opera type stuff. I love sci-fi for the fact that it has a lot of standalones, whereas fantasy, that is a rarity.
Yeah.
But I do love me a hard sci-fi series as well. Like that's probably my favorite side of sci-fi. Like the culture.
Is there a quick answer, Sam, to why fantasy seems to have all these huge series? Like if it's 3 books, that's low for fantasy. Usually it's like Witcher, all of these series, Sanderson writes they're all like sprawling.
I have
connected.
No idea.
I have a theory.
What is it?
My theory is that, or at least what I read a lot of fantasy for, is you want to enjoy the characters and the world building.
Okay.
And so if you like that world, you want to live in it more, kind of like with the culture. It wasn't enough to have just 1 or 2 books. You had to have more to explore all the aspects of it. Same is true with fantasy. You just want to spend more time with the characters and more time in that world, learning all the complexities. So
that's a great. I think you hit it on the nail on the head, because with science fiction, especially a lot of the classic science fiction, which I also like to read, they're ideas driven. So you have that idea and you're done. You told your idea, you told your story, you have the novum, boom, you're done. You blew somebody's mind, maybe you move on. The people are not as important. So yeah, that's a good answer. I don't know if you finished your thoughts, Sam.
No, I did, and
Okay.
I completely agree. Like, sci-fi is always being somewhat badly slated as a only ideas driven genre, and people say a lot of the characters are wooden. So sometimes that is true, and I agree, Whitney. Fantasy tends to be a lot more character focused in general, not always, but I would agree with that.
Well, I will also say that for people out there who, like, I always recommend on my channel, I have people who are primarily fantasy readers, and they're saying that they want to expand into science fiction. And I know it's a little unusual, but my recommendation for that transition, and I feel like sci-fi genre does the same thing in military sci-fi, because you have one character who has a bunch of problems, and usually those series are very long because it's about a group of people. It's about them overcoming odds or instances or crazy battle or something, and it's about the world and it's about the characters. So I think that people who like fantasy, who want to transition into science fiction, military sci-fi is actually maybe a really good transition there.
Okay.
And how about The Expanse, for example? Because that's kind of a lot more character driven, I think.
I would agree. I think so too. I have to admit I haven't read and finished all of that series, so I can't tell you 100%. But I feel the same way. I just don't feel like there are quite as many big space operas that I'm familiar with that capture that.
Mhm.
But I think that that is a perfectly reasonable place. I also think that that's why series that we see very popular on Fantasy BookTube, like the Sun Eater series, also are very popular with fantasy readers because it's about the character, it's about the world, and it's very expansive, lots of books. You want to spend more time in that world, you want to spend more time with those characters. Space opera can fill the same gap. For sure.
Yeah, that's so true. Great points. I do think Expense, and I think like you, Whitney, I've also only read the first 3 books. Did you read the first 3 also and stopped?
Only two.
Only 2. Okay, so I'm one ahead of you, but I stopped after 3, and it wasn't because I didn't like it. I just felt like I got enough at that time out of it, and then time passed, and I would have had to restart. But I think it's a good point, Sam, because you do have that found family, which is often a theme in fantasy, people coming together and then going on some sort of a quest. Obviously, Sam, not so wise. The name of your channel pretty clear,
Yes.
Lord of the Rings, right? Right there. So a quest. So I think that's a great point. I think that's a great series for someone who likes fantasy, but it is definitely a proper science fiction series. Maybe more so even than like the Sun Eater, which I've only read the first book, and I liked. But that one does feel like it's set in definitely in a science fiction setting, but it reads a little bit more like a fantasy to me. Expanse reads like a science fiction too. So
Yeah,
excellent
sure.
points. Excellent points, guys. So I have a couple more questions. I don't know. We don't need to get into all of them, but I had a question I wanted to ask. I thought this was maybe a fun question, maybe silly. If you were stranded on a deserted island and you'd have to read over and over just a single book, which for readers like us, that's a bad prospect to be stuck with only one book. But if you had to be stuck with just one, what book might it be? And why, I guess?
Do you want to go first, Whitney?
Whoever wants to go first.
I'm going to give you a cheat answer and then also a not cheat answer.
Okay.
I don't like rules. I don't know if you can tell that.
No problem. Rules are meant to be broken.
So I would take my single omnibus edition. Okay, so that's why it's a cheat. All right. But I would take my omnibus edition of the Hyperion Tantos because I feel like I could read that series 50 times and get 50 different takeaways from that series.
Is that including the Endymion books?
Definitely. I finished that the Endymion duology back to back, and I think it gets a bad rap. I really, really thought that the ending was incredible. Like, I had a book hangover for sure. I couldn't read anything else for like 2 days afterward because it was so good. I just couldn't. It was so good.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
That's a great answer, especially since you have an omnibus. So that actually, it's not a cheat. Hey, it's a single book. What about
Well,
you, Sam?
technically it's 4 books, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
It could be science fiction, but it doesn't have to be science fiction if you want to go with fantasy or something else. It's really, rules are meant to be broken.
No, this is why sci-fi. We're doing sci-fi. So you did actually warn us of this yesterday. So
this was
I did
the only
think about
question I
it.
threw out there. Yes.
So yes, I want a big book.
Yes.
Something that I can reread and get a lot out of. And also maybe something that can help me survive, right? Because I'm in a tough situation.
Interesting.
Okay? So
where is
I
this
just
going?
picked
Ooh.
The Stand. It's a damn long book. I can
Oh, yeah.
read this many, many times and I'll still get stuff out of it. And, you know, there's some survival aspect to it. You know, maybe I'll learn what is most important for me to do for me to survive next from reading this. Who knows? Otherwise, I've got a great story. So I choose The Stand.
Yeah, that's a good. So both great choices, both fantastic books. I love The Stand, and Hyperion is possibly my favorite science fiction book. Possibly, I don't know. It's that one. I love Fire Up on the Deep. I could go down the list, but Hyperion would probably. I was thinking would be the one that I would take also, Whitney, and maybe not this version, but because this one is not meant to be read. It's just meant to like.
It is the most beautiful set of all of the Hyperion covers. I love all 4 of those.
Yeah,
Those are so beautiful.
I've just got these old school paperbacks.
Yeah, they're great.
Mm-hmm.
I do love it though.
Those are amazing. Yeah, Hyperion. I would take it because of the fact that and I mean I would only take Hyperion because I do not have I have all the of course books, but not in one edition. But even just reading this one, I feel it's a story. It's cohesive, but you get so many different stories within that one story with the frame narrative. So you can almost pick and choose if you're in a certain mood and not read the whole book through, but just maybe read a story, the Priest's Tale, or the Scholars, some of my favorite from Hyperion. And that could be fun too. So maybe that's why Hyperion would come with me, but picking out a bigger book is a good idea. Maybe like 11/22/63, that's a chunker from Stephen King. That would be a good option as well.
I don't know, man. I have to disagree. If I took 11/22/63 with me, you just like cry and feel lonely the whole time. That sounds terrible.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point because he's kind of stranded in time in a different. Yeah. Well. Okay. So let's go into kind of rapid fire, where you just give me answer to one or the other questions. Since we mentioned time travel. So let's start with Sam. Sam, time travel. Do you go forward in time or backward in time?
Forward, easy.
Forward in time. Okay. Space opera or dystopian novels?
Ooh.
That's hard.
Dystopian.
Dystopian, really? Okay. Aliens or robots? AI. Sentient robots.
Oh, aliens.
Okay. Dune or Lord of the Rings? This might be a tough one for you.
Lord of the Rings.
Okay. I guess it was an easy one. All right. Good job, Sam. Same questions now for Whitney. We're going to start off with that time travel. Do you go forward in time or are you curious to go back to see how pyramids
all time forward. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, forward.
Forward.
Okay, cool. So we're all on the same page. We're all going forward. I was thinking about this, and the only reason not to go forward is, let's say, pyramids like 5,000 years back. Amazing to see that. You know what you're getting, pretty much. There's history, there's civilization. 5,000 years forward, you could go. What if there's nothing? What if we've destroyed the planet? And you're just like, holy shit. That was that one thought I had. about that.
Still be worth it. That's very much like the book timeline, where he goes backward and forward. You know what I'm saying? Like you can go too far back, just like you can go too far forward. But
Yeah. Good point. Okay, so space opera or dystopian, post-apocalyptic, whatever.
I don't know. That's really hard. I gotta say though, dystopians really can depress me more than anything else. So I'm gonna go with space opera.
Cool. You said dystopian, right?
That's right.
Okay, so there you differ. Okay, aliens, Whitney, or AI, sentient robots, androids, humanoid robots, whatever.
I mean, probably aliens, but AI is hard to give up. So aliens would have to be it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think aliens, just to know that they're out there, right? Just to have,
Exactly.
that's why I love reading about them, because it just sparks this something. But sentient robots, like drones in culture, they're so fun to read
Yeah,
about.
they're
So
amazing.
funny. They're just like little jerks floating around.
Well, you guys haven't gotten that far into the series yet.
Yeah, only 3 books.
So further into the series, you'll get more conversations with the minds themselves. I think so far you haven't had that much chat within the minds themselves.
Yeah.
And they are equally as amazing and funny. So
Consider
lot
Fleabag has a little bit, right, with the mind. Yep. But yeah, not a lot of engagement. Just the story kind of is framed around something that happens to a certain mind. But yeah. So last question for you: Dune or Lord of the Rings?
Dune.
Dune. Okay, cool.
I love Lord of the Rings. Don't get me wrong, but I think I've seen those movies like 10 times too many.
Yeah, true. Well, I mean, I would say I'm talking about books. I prefer Dune.
Mm-hmm.
I do love Hobbit. Because I can read it. Lord of the Rings I've read, but it took me so long. But when it comes to movies, I think Dune is so much better in my opinion, especially Dune 2. Just it elevated. I think it's better than Lord of the Rings. I mean,
I have the opposite opinion.
Really?
100% opposite. Okay, if
Wow.
we're talking about books, I'm going to go with the Dune series over Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
I 10 out of 10 think that the movie Lord of the Rings better than the books and better than the Dune movies.
Okay.
So
Really?
Opposite. Totally
I
opposite.
just thought it was too long for me. I don't know.
I was
beautiful setting. I mean, it was amazing, but I don't know, kind of lost me a bit. And obviously, Sam, you agree with Whitney, I can see.
It was nice being friends, but
I'm not saying I didn't like it. I loved it. I just thought Dune, especially Dune 2, to me, was perfection.
Oh man.
No, those movies are the best movies ever, in my opinion.
So Bart, we have to have a talk at some point. It doesn't have to be today, but we have to have a talk about Dune 2 and how it ruined the Dune series. Let's talk about it sometime. I understand this is not what this is for, but I think that we should have that discussion.
Okay, fair. Now I'm very curious.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. So, I mean, I think our viewers, whoever is watching out there, has learned quite a bit about what we like and don't like about science fiction in general. And now we're going to transition into a second part of this conversation for those who are interested in the culture in E&M Banks.
One question for you, Bart. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Before we
go ahead.
transition,
Yeah.
you said what we don't like in science fiction.
I'm sorry?
You said what we don't like in science fiction.
I said that?
Yeah, you said that.
There's nothing we don't like in science fiction. I was
That's
just
what
like,
I was about.
you didn't. I guess you didn't love Dune 2. So there's something that's why I was prompted to say what we don't like.
All right. I'll give you a pass this time.
But you're absolutely right. There's nothing about science fiction that I don't like. Well, there is actually. If we want to get into it, let's get into it.
Yeah.
I've been reading a lot of classic science fiction, 50s, 60s, 70s, and there's a lot of problematic stuff in those books, honestly. So if there's something that I don't like, sometimes, those things make it difficult to really enjoy the book. The idea is there, maybe the world building is there, but, there are problems around women, especially. I think there, you could have. I mean, what book was it that specifically? It seemed like there was not a single woman in the whole book of any note. So that bothers me a little bit.
You know what, Bart? That still happens.
Yeah.
Well-
So I run a book club here in Reykjavik, and one of the first books we read was We Are Legion, We Are Bob, right?
Yeah.
And I read it and I was like, oh, this is quite good. And then we all came to the meeting, and my wife is in this book club. And most of us were like, wow, that was quite fun. That was good. And then my wife just absolutely ripped it to shreds about how it's there are no women in that book, not a single woman. And the women are only really used to make him angry. And she basically just turned all of our opinions on their head. And she's done that with quite a few books, to be fair, not just that one. So it still does happen, but I agree. But I also think that it's probably just endemic of the times anyway. I think that probably is the case in a lot of fantasy as well.
Do you have a take on this, Whitney?
I do. I'm gonna be I guess I'm just very unusual. I think everybody is gonna have their pushing points, right? And what you can and can't handle in a book is very different for lots of different people. So kudos to everybody who, whatever your trigger is, that's fair. For some reason, mine seems to be different than many people's, because it doesn't bother me when there is no women in this story at all. Like, if they're just not there, fine. It's kind of like if you have a book where there's no gay people, like, fine, whatever. But it's when they're there and they're done super poorly.
Yeah.
So one of my big
agree.
triggers that I hate is, it seems like, especially in science fiction, but in other genres as well, there's always like a woman character who has to get raped, because goodness knows she cannot learn, and she has no other like trial or tribulation, and there's no other reason to reject the main character in any of his sexual advances unless she's been raped. I have a problem with that. I've seen that in many, 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 many of the older science fiction books I've read, and sadly some of the newer ones. I want to point out particularly one of the ones that I read most recently is Hominids by Robert Sawyer. I'm really mad about it.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, I loved We Are Legion, We Are Bob. Loved it. 100% loved it. And if you go further in the series, there's quite a few women characters that become big deals that put him in his place.
Nice.
But a lot of times you have to see this immature character, and it's over time that then he has to have room to get more mature sometimes. That being said, I'm not defending or saying that your wife's critique is bad. That's not it. I just wasn't in particular triggered by those things.
Yeah, I think with that one, so I agree with you a lot. Like, if I'm looking at an old book from the 60s or something, it's not great. There isn't good representation, obviously, but you do have to take it with a pinch of salt and be like, that is just kind of the times. It's not great, but what can you do about it? That was normal at the time, and we can look back at that. But I think what annoyed my wife at the time, or does, with other books, is like, this is the 21st century and we know that women exist now. So maybe we should, you have this imaginary world with all these crazy things are happening and there are no women. That was just kind of her point. But we could talk about We Are Bob in another video. Sorry.
Yeah. Great points, guys. I definitely agree that, and I agree with you, Whitney, that it isn't so much whether someone appears, like you mentioned, gay characters, for example. I think there are a lot of books now that go out of their way, and a lot of others, to include every single type of person that could be out there just as a token inclusion. And I think that's garbage. I think that's detrimental to the story and to our intelligence almost. If you're going to do it, there has to be some depth. You have to show some struggle that person, some growth, maybe some conflict, something, not just throw them in there. So we're seeing that, and also maybe, in my opinion, and this is all subjective, of course, but in my opinion, maybe too much in some of the modern stories where they're just there for, just for inclusion's sake, not because they're, really saying something. But there are books. The River World by Farmer. There's some books where I just think women were treated poorly and just seem like, and I just think that, especially with science fiction, because science fiction is supposed to project into the future, that some of these men, typically writing at that time, could not foresee a future where there would be more balance. Is a little disappointing. But usually, because I'm reading them not for characters, I can definitely look past it. But if there's anything that bothers me, going back to how we started this whole aside, it's that sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I will also add to it some of the struggles that I've had with science fiction, which is sometimes it seems like you need a doctorate in physics to, like, they want you to understand that they really thought about this light hyperspace drive, and they're going to describe to you all of the technical details where it doesn't actually push forward the story in any way, shape, or form. I've had a couple of books that I've read where I'm like, this is 12 chapters about how this engine works.
Yeah.
And I'm glad for you that this was cool and entertaining for you, but this is like 12 chapters is just too long. like let's do a couple paragraphs, maybe a couple pages, and I'll just move on. But for me, that's something that I struggle with, because at a certain point it's like, okay, I get it, you're smart, but I just don't think that you have to prove that you have outthought every reader out there.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so let's try to transition into the culture world, the amazing universe of the culture. Culture is, of course, this galaxy spanning millions of stars settled. Who knows how many? Do you know, Sam, how many years into the future? Is it stated anywhere the way it is like with Dune, where we kind of know the history of Dune and how things got to where they are? Or is that
No, it's never fully described.
Okay.
There is kind of a general timeline, at least in the last book. The oldest man alive was 10,000 years old, and he was thought to be around near the start of the culture, but nobody really knows.
Okay, but we don't know how far. But it's safe to say it's many, probably thousands of years into the future, based on the expansion of this civilization. And now they're humanoids. They also have their sidekicks, which are typically these droids. And they live together in symbiosis. And there's also minds who really are de facto, if there are any leaders to this society, it would be those minds, which are just incredibly advanced, basically godlike AIs that are controlling much of what happens in the culture. And culture, of course, is this civilization that has pushed so far beyond where we can see today that they're post-scarcity. You could do whatever you want. There's really no hierarchy to them. So everyone is equal. No one can really, technically, in most situations, tell somebody else what to do. And that's true with the droids. The droids are treated as sentient, 100% equal to humans. So that's kind of the culture. They have these incredible ships that have millions of people living on them, traveling between stars. They have these orbitals, for example, these humongous structures that are ginormous, billions of people living on these orbitals, having fun. They can, of course, live pretty much as long as they want. They have rejuvenation techniques. We read in Use of Weapons about that a little bit. So it's a really, in my opinion, a very interesting possible future if technology advances with non-stop speed. I think eventually, thousands of years from now, we may get there. There are, of course, places that are beyond the culture's reach. And this is kind of where we get into with the book Use of Weapons. We see those places and how culture, this society that is supposed to be hands off and just do your own thing and free love and like hippies almost, where they kind of, do some things that are questionable to say the least. And within culture, the division that does that bidding is called contact. So they're the ones who go into places that are beyond the culture's sphere of influence and establish contact. And then if something intervention needs to take place within contact, we have special circumstances. So that's kind of the overview, I think, of the culture for those viewers who maybe don't know what it is. Spoiler free, just this is what the culture, this is the setup, this is the universe. And let's talk a little bit about this book. If maybe one of you guys wants to give like a little summary of what the book is like. There's an interesting structure to it that we need to talk about as well. Whoever wants to volunteer.
Sam, this is your second go through, so
Yeah.
you're probably going to do a better job than I will.
So, yes, it is difficult to explain because it is an interesting structure, but the story revolves basically around two main characters, three if you include the drone that is basically Smar's, I don't know what you'd call the drone, accomplice, friend, both. But Smar is a member of special circumstances, as you've mentioned, and her job is basically to recruit people to work for special circumstances and handle certain jobs that are of the more delicate nature, as you were saying. So Smar's most frequent employee is a man called Zakalwe. So the story basically starts by Smar being asked to hire him again. And that's where the forward motion plot goes. We have two plots. We have the one that's going forward in time, and we have one that's going backward in time. The one that's going forward is focusing on Smar and Zakalwe doing another job for the culture. And the one that goes backwards in time is mainly focused on Zakalwe. So Zakalwe has a tortured past. He has some hidden memories that we don't know about that basically supposedly caused him to join the culture and do what he does. And so as we go backwards through time, we learn more about how much he's worked with culture, the different jobs he's done. And through each one, we get more snippets of his haunted past and eventually find out his upbringing and what caused him to be the way he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great description of the book. Great setup. So we know what the world is like, and we have this guy Zakalwi who is our main protagonist, and we do learn a lot about him from beginning to the end. And we're gonna try to no spoilers. If we want to, maybe just let's just if there's a spoiler, let's leave it for the end. If we want to talk about the end of the book, which would be a big spoiler, let's talk about that. I suppose at the end, maybe. But now the story, Whitney, and the title also of this book. This book was written in 1990. It's the third book in the culture, but here for those who maybe have not read any, they can be read in any order. I'm reading them in the order they were written, but they could be read in any order, I think. So this is the third book, and we have the title, Use of Weapons. And I think that's an interesting also. I think the title here is really interesting, and it really becomes a theme as we read the book. Do you have any thoughts on the title or, the book in general, Whitney, that you wanted to bring up?
I mean, I think when I was trying to explain to my parents while I was reading this book, because everybody's like, what are you reading? I kind of tried to say that this is about such a far-flung future, that this is like kind of the new state of politics and how things happen in the future and how the culture tries to influence different political things of other planets. And I really liked the title. I love it when authors have a specific title for a reason, and you discover that title inside this book, and that was definitely the case in this one. We get a quote that's pretty close to the beginning, actually, where we find out that use of weapons is really about their ideas and theories on every single thing in your life, every aspect, every person, every possible potential aspect of people's lives are all about your ability to use weapons, I guess. So you can fight, or you can use anyone or anything as a weapon. And it takes a lot of skill and talent to know how to accurately and effectively deploy those weapons. And I do think that this book had at least a subtle undertone for me of, is that going too far or isn't it? And who and what exactly can be a weapon?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great point. I think in this book, like no other book that maybe that I read, makes you think of what a weapon could be, and how it could be utilized to devastating results to others, but also perhaps to yourself when you use that weapon. I'm thinking specifically of something. This book also, and I don't think this is a spoiler because I know some covers have a chair on the cover. I thought this was also fascinating. The fact that the chair was such a big theme throughout this book, very, very unique. And also the structure of this book, when we're learning, like one thread is moving through time and the other one is moving backwards, and they kind of meet at one point. But this book is challenging to read, and I think it was a lot more fun reading it with you. I think it's a great book to do a buddy read when you can, kind of bounce some ideas off and learn some things. And maybe we figured some things between each other doing these buddy reads that we thought was one, and then it turned out to be maybe something other. But I think this book, with so many things to think about between the chair, some situations that happen in the book that are kind of ambiguous, like the rape scene, that was it a rape, was it not? There's a lot of these ambiguous things thrown into the book. It was a book that I definitely felt as soon as I finished it that I would love to reread it with a new understanding. And I know this was a reread for you, Sam, but you took so much time that it almost felt like a new book, right?
That's right, yeah. There were key things I remembered, including the ending, especially because you don't really forget an ending like that. But I did forget a lot of the nuances. I remembered the chair. But yeah, it was a good 4 or 5 years between reads. So it's hard because it does benefit from a reread if you probably read it quite close together. But who has time to be reading the same book twice in a row? Nobody, at least not on BookTube anyway.
Well, by the way, just for people who haven't read Use of Weapons, in case you happen to be watching this, like we just kind of described how, like strange it's put together. But I would also add that this character seems to be obsessed and very reactive to chairs, and we don't know why until it's revealed at the very end. We also have an ending that seems to be a culmination and change a lot of what happened in the story. So without any spoilers, we should at least mention those things so that way this discussion is a little bit more.
That's a good point. And I do think that it's also worth mentioning that if you as a reader prefer to read books that are neatly tied in a bow at the end where everything is revealed, and this may not be a satisfying ending. It wasn't for me, but then as I'm thinking about it, I'm starting to appreciate the ending a little bit more, and the fact that so much is left unsaid about Zakhalwi's transition, let's just say, right? His arc, what happens, who he is, who he becomes. I think not giving that specific answers to us, which I know, Whitney, we were looking for, and saying, well, without it almost seems pointless. It was frustrating, right? But I do start to appreciate that.
Go on.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say for the viewers yet again, when we were reading this, one of my favorite aspects is being able to finish the end of the day. We just did 50 pages each day for what was it, 8 days or something like that. Yeah. And then we would chat about what we thought happened and what was important or what wasn't important and what we think is going to happen next and our reactions to a lot of the things that were happening. And there were so many little diamonds in the rough in this story that he would put this really cool idea just plunked in there, and then you'd get 2 paragraphs on it, and that was it. And it wasn't huge plot points. It was just like fun things about what's going to happen in the future. So if you're somebody who happens to enjoy those little nuggets, I would definitely recommend this book. But we had a lot of chat, I think, about the ending, because whether it was effective or not, which we all kind of disagreed about, and we had lots of points of confusion on, man, the story haunts you, right? I mean,
does. It
like,
sticks.
it's hard to not think about it and trying to figure it out. And I know you guys keep saying, like, who has time to read it again, but I was really tempted to go back and flip through it again. I know you're making fun of me, but, like, I mean, I really wanted to know, like, and that's, I think, something that's really a good thing about this book. You know, ambiguous endings are really good for that thing, because you do try to figure it out. And it is a story where even if I reread it, I'm still not sure that I would totally have the ending. Like, I don't think that this is answerable. Questions are not answerable, which is both good and bad. And I think it can definitely haunt some people, and it can just make the book for other people.
So let's maybe jump into it. So, like, major spoiler, if you haven't read the book and you're planning on reading it, bye-bye, or come back. I'll put a spoiler and then I'll do something. It'll be clear. The end of the book. This is spoiler. 3, 2, 1. What the hell? What? We found out at the end of the book that the guy we were reading about is not the guy we were reading about. Like, and then it ends kind of without, a resolution in some way, and without, which you were pointing to, Whitney, without an explanation how he changed, why he changed, and how could someone like him, someone who was so psychopathic, change. And what do you guys think? Have you had a little bit more time now to?
Well, Bart, why doesn't somebody clarify what the question that we had was, since we're doing the spoiler?
Yeah. So Zakalwe wasn't Zakalwe. That was a stage name. That was the name of his basically adopted brother, at least somebody he grew up with. And he took that name after he had brutally murdered that guy's sister and made her into a chair, and then just pretended to be him for the rest of his life.
Hence use of weapons. The chair and the sister was a weapon, right? To actually Zakalwe kills himself, and then the brother who takes his
name.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many things to do with use of weapons, because obviously Zakalwe, as we knew him, was used as a weapon by the culture, and there's a lot of moral questions around doing this, and the way that they go about it is they're never really clear about what they're doing. They're never actually telling you why, and then you could find out that you're actually on the wrong side after all, and they were just lying to you. And there's so many questions.
Yeah, that's a separate aspect to it, but a fascinating aspect also of that manipulation, right? That the culture and the special circumstances was doing to that person. But also, it's interesting because of the structure. When we find out, you start thinking, well, which one was it? Was it the brother? How do you pronounce his name? Do you guys? The actual Zakalwe was
Ethelial Mel or something like that.
Mel, exactly. I can never pronounce Ethelial Mel. At which point are we reading about him? Which parts are, because we have the parts where they're growing up. We have the part with the sister, getting injured, and part of her, like all of these things. And was that in Zakalwe? Was it in like? There's so much to decipher, and if that reread, a pretty quick reread post original read through, would probably reveal all of that, and then you'd be like, oh, now I get it. I feel some of the confusion stems from the fact that there's a lot of hidden meaning. It's a puzzle that is that is a little difficult to put together on the first read, I think.
It's this ending. So the first time I read it, I was absolutely blown away and thought it was the most genius thing I've ever read. Right, because when you think back to it, there are so many hints, and I completely just I was just so amazed by the writing genius of Banks. Because even though this is a questionable ending, I think this book is absolutely genius still, even with unsatisfying ending in the questions. I still think it's amazing. I do want answers. I don't always need answers, but I do agree that there is a disconnect somewhere. But again, this is what makes this book still amazing, because we can constantly think about it and constantly question it. It's not all neatly tied up in a bow and you'll think about it forever. But when I was reading through it again, I was reading it thinking every time that this guy is actually a Theliomel, right?
Mhm.
Not even thinking this might still be Zakalwe, which we still don't even really know. So again, once you guys said this, I was like, oh shit, maybe there is two, and we don't actually know.
There has to be two, because when we haven't gotten to the big reveal yet, like right before that, when we're finally getting the explanation of the chair, right, and what the chair's significance is. Remember that the reaction of the brother, the real Zakalwe, is to hold on to his temple. That has to be Zakalwe. That has to be the real one, because it says, I hold a gun to my temple. That could not have been Theliomel. So it has to be that we're getting perspectives from both men.
Yeah, and I mean, we have this situation also when Zakalwe comes back after he's already been doing things, and then he catches his sister having sex, which we thought maybe it's rape, maybe it's not. It was somewhat ambiguous the way it was written, which is also interesting, the way Ian M. Banks writes. But there were two, and that was Zakalwe. And right, I mean, unless we're just like,
yeah, it has to be. We have been getting almost all the flashbacks seem to have been coming from the real man.
Yeah,
and we don't actually know Theliomel hardly at all.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say, so the big problem is, how do you go from being a gentleman who fights against your brother and then kills your half sister, sort of, and then makes a chair out of her body?
Yeah.
Into somebody who wants redemption, because there doesn't seem to be a connection there.
And I thought maybe that happened when he was escaping on that long flight, wherever that took like close to 100 years in cryo, and he was kind of in his own head. There he was at one point on the ship with the two guys. I thought maybe he almost kills. That is not Zakalwe. That is his kind of brother.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's where it starts. And I thought that was the only maybe time, if I'm reading it right, where we do see things flip. We do see maybe some
regret. Yeah.
Some regret, some introspection. He is definitely subdued there. He's thinking. He's got a lot of time to ponder. Like, what the hell did I do?
Well, so I did want to add that after our big discussion, I posted on Reddit to see what other people had to say. And I did get an interesting response that I haven't told you guys yet, because I wanted to save it for our discussion here. So feel free to react to this. So somebody responded and said there are 3 possible options. And obviously one of the options is that we didn't get an answer. But the third option, and I don't remember the second, so I'm sorry, but the third option really stayed with me. And it's at the final chapter where we know Theliomel is aged and he's dying and he's old and he's trying to get forgiveness from the sister that he loved. Okay, even though that seems like an impossible ask. And she's not really letting him talk, even though he's sick. The guy said, well, he said in the sentence, but she, and she keeps interrupting him.
Yeah.
And he said he's thinking that the answer to this is that because it's use of weapons, his sentence that he never actually got to say was, but she killed herself, or she was already dead, and I just used her body as a weapon to try to win the war, and that it wasn't him actually committing murder. Now, I don't know if that's true, but he did say, but she. I did look it up. He did say that. So I thought that was an interesting, thank you, Reddit answer as a possibility. It's still not very clear. It's still like inserting our assumptions into the story, but I just wanted to.
It's interesting. I'll have to reread it. I'll have to look at it to see if there could be some hint of him trying to, but it is. I think that's what Ian M. Banks probably wanted. Multiple, looks
interpretations.
interpretations, exactly.
Yeah. Another one that I saw that I could kind of get along with as well, because before you put your post up on Reddit, I was reading a lot of them as well. And this is such a divisive ending, by the way, which again is great. But one that I saw, which I could kind of get along with. Now, I am no psychologist. I know nothing about it. But this man is clearly messed up. And you know, he was messed up before he went to war, then he was at war, and that can do a lot of messed up things to you. And then he takes on the name, and I'm wondering if at some point he started believing that he was his brother, or like so close to believing that he was his brother that, you know, it was almost a reality in his head, and that he couldn't even tell which one he was at some points.
Yeah, I've seen that also. I've seen that in a couple of videos where people thought that maybe that was actually the case, especially since the time frames can be stretched in the culture. There's rejuvenation techniques, and maybe you want to kind of bury that past so deep in your subconscious that you're no longer aware of it. It's
And
a stretch, but
and
yeah.
you know that most times that we're getting these references to the chair and to the awful thing that happened is when he's in some kind of weird lucid state. So a lot of the times is when he's on death's door, so he's basically not there anymore, or when he was in that drug tent taking this completely mind-altering drug where he's in a trance for days. Those are the times that we really get the flashbacks to that time. So maybe those are the times where his consciousness is allowing him to go back to the truth.
Yeah.
Well, that is also the time, though, when he's wakened from it by somebody calling his name. Is that Cowboy?
Yeah.
On like a subconscious level.
Mm.
So maybe.
We'll never know.
We'll never know, but it was, I think we can all agree that it was a fantastic buddy read.
Oh, amazing.
Yep. It was a perfect book for a buddy read. And I think it's a book that I would recommend to any science fiction reader, just because, you know, you got to try it. I think it's a good one. I think it's one of those that isn't like every other book. There are some books, in my opinion, in science fiction that are standouts, and they're not going to appeal to everyone, maybe like Blindside, for example. But you should try it. You know, you should try it. And I think this one falls in that category. How do you guys feel about this book and recommending it in general?
I have no qualms recommending this book. I just want to discuss it is the thing. I want to know. I want to talk about it. I think I absolutely love books that give me pause and make me discuss and think about ideas. And this one did that in lots of different ways. And it wasn't just the ending, which is something that I appreciate. You know, one of the biggest questions that hit me at the beginning of the book that you guys saw me go through was, do I even like this main character guy? Like, is he even an ethical, nice guy? I had that question from the beginning, which now makes more sense as we went through. So I really like that the author, I mean, he knew what he was doing. We just didn't understand why, and maybe still don't. But I really like that. I thought it was good. I will for sure be picking up another culture book. And I don't know. I definitely recommend it.
Yeah. And what about you, Sam? Was this because you've read all the culture books? How would you rank this one in the pantheon of culture books?
So before this buddy read, it would have been number one.
Okay.
Now I'm not so sure.
I'm guilty, Sam.
No, it's a good thing. It's no. I'll just have to read them all again and find out. So it's definitely still up there. Like, even I've said this many times, despite the ending, despite how you feel about it, it is still a brilliant book. It's so clever, like you said, Bart. It's extremely different. So if you're looking for something outside the norms of sci-fi, but within that space opera setting, then you're going to find something really cool and interesting. But it's also just, you know, one thing I wanted to say as well is a lot of the stories that are going back in time, they're all really different in feel.
Mhm.
Like they all feel like a different short story, and they all have a different atmosphere, a different feeling. And I think Banks really shows off his range of writing within the book. So it's just a brilliant book, whether you like the ending or not, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And there's good writing. I mean, the writing is really solid. It's not just the ideas, the world building. The writing is also good. There's some intelligent, really smart moments. Just the way what authors' thoughts that are slipping into it. I thought. I mean, it all starts with the title and it ends with the twist plot, which is always fun, even though this one is controversial and we still are, thinking about it, whether we love it or hate it. But I think it's an awesome book. I don't know if it would be in my top 10 science fiction books of all time, but I'd have to think about it. The interesting thing about culture books, the three that I've read, consider Fleabag, Player of Games, and now this one, I like them all, and they all feel so different. The first one, consider Fleabag, feels a little bit lighter in tone, just more like an action adventure, but with a protagonist who there is like getting constantly he's tortured all the time, basically. I thought it was a great read. I really loved it. And then Player of Games was a completely different feel to it. And like you, Sam, said, in this book, it seems like from chapter to chapter, the feel was a little bit different. And that, I think, is a mark of a fabulous author, to be able to do that and to give us this gift, this piece of art that we can then, look at and analyze and come to our own conclusions, whether we like it or don't like it, or what we think about it. And he also had another quote, to kind of maybe slowly wrap this up. This segment here is, everyone reads a different novel. And I think this is so true. He was in an interview talking about this, how when you watch a movie, everybody watches the same movie, but you read a different novel because it's you who is imagining the things that you read, who is filtering it through your own perceptions in a much more nuanced way than with just images on a screen. So I think that's in the case of this book specifically, because many books are so, I don't want to call them shallow. They're great books also, and they could be fun, but the depth of them is such that most people will agree on what's going on. This book is a deep dive, and that's what I loved about it.
Yeah, 100%.
Would you guys recommend? Because I haven't read Consider Phlebas. Do you think that should be my next culture read, or do you think I should go on to a different book in the culture? Having already read Player of Games, and then we just finished Use of Weapons, of course.
I mean, I if I can jump in, I liked Consider Phlebas a lot. I don't think it's a favorite in the series for many, but I thought it was really good. It was a bit uneven, but overall, I thought the beginning, the ending, really solid. It's a simpler book. It doesn't quite have any structural, things happening. So it's a quick read in that. Maybe a little bit less to think about what is actually going on, but it also sets up the culture really well. And I don't know if Ian M. Banks necessarily, when he was writing these books, thought about how he's presenting them in order. Obviously, each one is a standalone story, but Consider Phlebas does take place kind of in the beginning of the story. There's this major war with aliens. I mean, it's right in the beginning. And so you do get a lot of a little bit of backstory. I think the subsequent novels, I don't know if any of them go back to that time. I think they reference the time of the Iberian Wars or something like that. But it is kind of a beginning in that sense. So you do get some interesting things about culture. And the interesting thing about Consider Phlebas also is the fact that I believe, and Sam will correct me, I think it's the only one that looks at culture from the outside. So the protagonist is someone who's actually fighting against culture. So I think it's a good one to read, and I enjoyed it. So what do you think, Sam?
I think you're at the right time to read it now. I wouldn't recommend it as a first read, but I read it after reading Player of Games, so I went back after that, and then went through chronological order, publication order. So I think you're at a perfect time to read it, and you basically everything you said is right. But I think it's not the perfect one to start on because of that outside perspective, and it is just quite different to everything else. I mean, they all are quite different, but it is kind of a bit before the time that Banks looks at later. and you don't get as much context in that one. So I do think it is a good one to go back on. So I would not, anybody who's watching, I would recommend not starting on Consider Fleabas or Accession or Inversions. Any of the others, you're fine.
That's helpful. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, and I would say too that if you haven't watched any of the culture, I wasn't lost when I started reading Use of Weapons. So if for some reason somebody picked up here, I think it would be fine, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a challenging book, but not in that sense. It could work also as the first one because it may just blow your mind and you're gonna fall in love with these books and want to read more. But yeah, it feels like a different book to me than Consider Fleabas. So if you start with Use of Weapons and it doesn't work for you, I wouldn't give up on the culture.
No.
Basically.
No.
Yeah, they're all different. Cool. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to add as far as anything really? We're over an hour now.
Well, I just want to say, Bart, thanks for putting us together and doing the buddy read.
That was you. You're
you
being too nice.
You put us together. You got us together. So.
Well, I think big picture, like if we really want to zoom out, I have to give credit to Johanna from Johanna because she invited Whitney and myself to be part of her fabulous series, Why Read, episode 33. It was a good one. We had a fun time. Totally go a little bit into that direction, a little bit more. I'd love to see more of that because that is still my one of my all-time favorite booktube videos. And Sam, you were watching. You were also in the comments, and all three of us connected thanks to that video. So yeah, if you want to like watch that video, go to Johanna's channel for sure. But we have to give her a little bit of credit as well for putting this trio together because this was a lot of fun on the body read. I know we're gonna do more in the future. I'm sure we've talked about it a little bit already, so there'll be more. We had a good time, and I think we get along really well, and that's awesome. That's a big part of why BookTube is a great community. Because of being able to put like-minded people together, and it is not easy. I actually have a question for you before we end the video. Now that I think about it, would you? I'm curious because obviously both of you have fabulous channels. I should mention that Whitney, you have a fantastic channel that's been up for how many? Couple of years has it been?
Yeah, I think it's 2 years now.
2 years, yep, 2 years, and it's grown tremendously. And your production level is fantastic. From the editing to the content, some of your videos are just incredible. I really enjoyed, and I clicked on it honestly because it was you. Like I'll watch every single video from you, but I wouldn't normally watch these videos. You'll see like, a holiday shopping guide. Like I'm not interested in those videos typically, but holy shit, your video was so good. And I mean, all of them. And I know you have a secret video that you're working on that I'm not going to talk about. If anyone has not subscribed to Whitney's channel, if anybody watching, I'm sure everybody has. If you're watching me, you're definitely watching, well, this way, Whitney. But if you haven't, you have to subscribe. Check out some of her videos. And there's a good one coming up. I can't wait for that one. And when it comes to Sam, your channel is a little bit newer, right? Has it been 5 months only, 4 months?
3.
3. Okay, I was close. Only 3
Man,
months.
You're killing it for being on that tour. You're killing it.
You're killing it, yes. I mean, the amount of subscribers you already have. You have that video that is really doing well. That video is popping. That's a great video. That's the big book video, right? Am I right about that?
Right. Yeah.
I love that video. That was awesome. I want to steal that idea and do one as well. Because who doesn't? What is
You're
it,
muted, Whitney?
You're mute, Whitney. You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that.
There you go. I don't know.
I was just saying that I'm going to steal the idea too. So.
Oh, you're all welcome to it. I steal all the time.
Of course, that's what we do here. We share. We don't steal. We share. It's one big community. So yeah. Oh, I had a question for you though. So since you both have these channels, do you make friends and family watch your channels? No. Do you just keep it to the internet, to the strangers out there?
I'll answer first. Firstly, I also wanted to echo what Whitney said. Thank you for sorting this video out, and thank you both for the buddy read. This is my first ever buddy read. As you said, I am brand new, and it was so much fun. Like, it was so fun.
Sam,
it was amazing to get the
I have to
ideas.
jump in, but it's honestly, it's all downhill from here.
I guess it depends on the book, maybe. But no.
Depends on the book, depends on the company. Come on.
No, that is true. That is true. But as you said, we might be doing more. So,
Oh yeah,
it's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
So I know I'll get the highs again. But no,
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. The question, friends and family. So I waited a while to tell anybody that I had a channel. Firstly, because I was slightly embarrassed.
Yes.
Because I don't think I'm very good at it. That's just what
That's
I'm
not
like.
true.
No, that's just what I'm like. This is partly why I call myself Sam Not So Wise. My channel is all about self-deprecation when it's not about books. That's just what I'm like. So I was a little embarrassed. So I have told some friends now, and they do watch it. But my wife hasn't watched a single of my videos. So I'll let you decide how you feel about that.
That's funny. And you said you were shaking your head no?
Mm-mm.
You
No.
don't tell everybody at work or friends, family, you don't make them watch?
No. I really like having my booktube life be very separate from my regular life. I started my channel partially because I don't have tons of sci-fi friends. I have like one or two, but not a lot. So I really like being able to appreciate and know you guys, because I don't have a lot of people in my life who read the same stuff that I do. So for one, I don't think they would understand or care. And I think it's more fun to just kind of have that anonymity a little bit.
Yeah. So when I started, I definitely did make my kids watch the videos. I was always like sending them a link, like, "Hey guys, did you watch?" And then the next day when I saw that there's no answer, like, "Hey, did you watch it already?" But I gave up on that. My kids, I have two girls. Yeah, it hasn't. But my wife, I have to say, my wife. Hi, Johanna. I'm sure she's gonna watch this. My wife is a fan now. I guess she watches all the videos, and I'm also happy that she is reading a lot more. This year she read 25 books. She always read, but she stepped up her game a little bit. And we talk about books, so it's nice to bring this into my family life a little bit. But otherwise, I'm like you guys. It's a nice escape, and most other people in my life don't know about this site.
Well, Bart, I did see at least one of your videos, because I've been watching your channel for a while now, that you had like a couple of books that you were like, these are books that I've read that I liked. And then you had a couple of books that are like, these are the books that my wife read that she liked. So I have seen that on your channel.
Yeah.
So maybe one day you'll be able to get her to appear on your channel and do a review of her books. That would be so cool.
That might be that's a good idea. I have thought about it. She does read, and I don't just read science fiction. And on my channel, I don't only talk about science fiction, even though it's predominant. It's probably 80% science fiction. But if I read other books, I'll talk about them for sure. I just read a good one, for example, All the Sinners Bleed. It's the first and only crime fiction that I'm gonna read this year. I do like one crime fiction per year, like 5 Decembers. Was the book I read. Excellent. And this book was really good too. So yeah, I'll talk about those books. But she doesn't read a lot of SF. She has read few based on my recommendations, books that I thought she would enjoy, like Project Hail Mary, something lighter like this one, In the Lives of Puppets, which is not science heavy, but more driven by characters and story. And she liked them. 1120 263 she loves. So yeah, that's a good idea. And I did have my daughter on the channel one time. We read Scythe, which is kind of like I guess it's a young adult book, and we talked about it. I had a great time talking to her about the books. So that was a lot of fun. That was, I don't know, a year ago or so.
I don't think I've seen that episode. I'll have to go look for that.
Yeah, you'll see it. It's up there for sure on the channel with my daughter, with Ania. So yeah, unless you guys have something else to add, I want to thank you very much, first of all, again, for the buddy read, because it was a ton of fun. And then also for this video, I think this was awesome. This was the first, like I said, inaugural, the premiere of Why Sci-Fi, which I think we did a good job, guys. I think this was fun.
It's gonna be a hit, but
It's gonna be a hit.
Yes,
Yeah.
it will.
we were
Friday
awesome.
night. We're gonna go live. We're gonna go live. It's gonna be a Friday night thing. Jimmy Nuts, Johanna, whoever else is, doing live stuff. Forget about it. Move aside. Here I come. But thank you guys again for talking about use of weapons. A great book. We recommend you all check it out, try it, get into culture. It needs to be read more. It really is a series that I think is gonna appeal to many. Broad appeal, crossover appeal, perhaps. Somewhere between hard sci-fi and soft sci-fi. We love it. Thank you very much. Check out Sam Not So Wise and Whitney's Secret Sauce of Storycraft. Fabulous channels. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Bart. Because it's just a different country in the summer compared to the winter. It's like another place.
Wait, is winter actually a time to go, though? Because I thought summer
you-
was the only time to visit.
It just depends what you like. If you like cold climates, then yeah. If you like snow,
I
that
do.
kind of stuff.
I do.
You don't get as much daylight, obviously, because we have the whole loads of darkness in the winter. So you have less time to do stuff in the day, but it's still absolutely stunning.
But you have the Aurora Borealis, right?
Correct, we do, yes.
Yeah, that's on my bucket list. I want
Yes.
to go to Iceland specifically to see that.
Well, if you ever come, just let me know and I'll give you a lot of tips.
All right.
That's amazing. And you had a visitor, another booktuber recently. Is that right? Am I?
That's right.
Phillip
Yeah,
Chase.
yeah. Philip Chase came. So I always knew that he loved the idea of Iceland, or at least he's obsessed with the sagas from Iceland. Because, he studied a lot of medieval literature and they are from here. So he's very interested. So I was always just like jokingly in his comments, like, oh, you should come and visit. And then one day he said, oh, I'm coming to Iceland. So I said, you're joking? Like, do you need some tips? And he's like, yes. So I sent him my email and he got in touch. And I ended up basically being a tour guide for Philip for 3 days.
Oh my God.
It was
What
brilliant.
a cool story. That's so fun.
It's so awesome. Like it was such a surprise because I've been watching him basically from the start of his channel. So like, I almost feel like I know him in a way,
He's a nice guy.
No, actually, in person, he's awful. He's an absolute monster. He's, no, just as you see, he's a lovely man. And I took him to what's called the Golden Circle, which is like a typical tourist destination. It's got like what in America you'd call a geyser, but we call him a geyser. And a huge waterfall and like this old historical place where the foundations of the earth are coming apart.
Wow.
So that was awesome. And I took him to this geothermal river. So it's a hot river and you walk up a mountain for an hour and then you go and bathe in this hot river. And it was stunning.
Interesting. Here, geezer is like an old guy. That's a geezer.
Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah.
Or maybe that's where you throw the geezers anyway.
Yeah.
Let's get back to science fiction. Enough about Philip Chase. He's getting free promotion. Check out his book, The Way of Eden, which I actually listened to the audio and I enjoyed it. Anyway, so guys, tell me, maybe Whitney, let's start with you. My question.